Welcome to Conversations with Poets. I'm Michael Klam, Associate Publisher of the San Diego Poetry Annual. I'm here with Adam Greenfield, and looking forward to talking to you. Adam, we've been buds for a long time. Buds. It's so good to be with you here, because you're usually on the other side. You're usually doing the interviewing, right?
Yes.
We'll get into that. Before we do, I want to thank Point Loma Nazarene University. Got to thank the Point TV crew, doing a fantastic job this year. Nathan Gibbs and James Wicks in the Department of Communication Studies, and our other bud, Katie Manning, over there in the Department of Literature, Journalism, Writing, and Languages. That's the poetry department. That's where they get a little bit of everything, right? The place where poetry comes from. The City of San Diego Department of Cultural Affairs, it's now the DCA. It used to be the Commission for Arts and Culture. They've switched it up, the DCA.
I think it sounds more official.
It does.
Yeah.
Like there should be a heavy piano riff right after it. Dun, 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 dun. And good for them, because they created the Poet Laureate program, and that's where Conversations with Poets came from. Ron Salisbury was our first Poet Laureate, and then Jason Magabo Perez, who has kept Conversations with Poets going. That's why we're here today. And then, of course, San Diego Poetry Annual, that's where my heart's at. The team, you're on the team as an editor, and everybody who helps out getting the annual out every year, which is really a community project, right? Giving people a place to exist on the page. San Diego Entertainment and Arts Guild, Bill Harding, and of course, Central Library downtown, where we'll be back next year, as a matter of fact. So Adam, you claim to be a San Diego-based podcast producer, writer, and fan of all cats.
Yes, but especially the last one. But I like to say writer before podcast producer.
Oh,
now.
you do?
Yeah, I switch it up.
Why is that?
It's where it's my true love. You know, so I love making podcasts. I love producing podcasts and working with people and getting their stories out too. But for me, writing is always, ever since I was a kid, what I've wanted to do. So I try to now put that first, so my brain is right up there with writing first.
Did it just happen? Like you realized you wanted to be a writer, or did you have someone?
No, I actually, what just happened was that I finally got the, I guess you could say nerve, or confidence, I guess, to call myself, now I am a writer first and foremost. It took a little while, but I got there.
Well, even putting together podcasts, right? You're writing, you have to create that. It all starts with writing, doesn't it?
It does, it does. In some projects you have scripts, so you got to write those. It's a different kind of writing that I prefer to do. Prefer is a bad word, but it's a different kind of writing.
Yeah, and you've prepared for some heavy hitters, right? Noam Chomsky.
Yeah, I interviewed Noam Chomsky.
MIT, how was that?
That was interesting. You know, sometimes you have these bucket list items you don't know are bucket list items, you know.
And then it hits you.
Right. So just to talk to him, and even he has no clue who I was before and probably doesn't now again.
He's busy.
He's also 10 days older than water, but
right.
but he like for just 20 minutes, you know, he said my name back and forth, and I thought that was it was cool to be in that sort of atmosphere and place to be able to talk to somebody like that.
Yeah, and did you ask him about why the world is the way the world is?
I wish I could have.
Did he speak to it for 3 hours without breathing?
No, he actually had to be walked to the place and then walked out.
He did. Yeah,
but it was only like a good 20, 30-minute conversation, but it was on a specific subject of professional communication, because the series was for grad students at MIT to be able to explain what they're studying to us normals, you know, and for them that can be a little difficult when they get into the jargon and in deep in it. So
yeah, you got to be able to communicate. I wonder how many people have gone to a classroom at the university and they meet the professor, maybe someone who they admire, and then about 20 minutes in they realize that this person cannot speak.
Yeah,
this person cannot articulate, you know, on the page, the research, the genius.
And sometimes when they get out there and they have to talk about these things to a general audience, you know, they struggle a little bit, you know. So it was nice to be able to talk to him about communication and a lot of other people about it as well.
Well, what's the trick?
There isn't one.
He didn't say.
Yeah, well, the thing with Noam Chomsky is he's he's going to get you close, but he's going to then say, okay,
You
fly
gotta
little
do
bird,
it.
you know, so
He's a good teacher.
that's what teachers
That's
do.
what he does.
Yeah.
That's what he does, for sure. And then you also do Making Comics Gutter Talk, and there's been over 100 episodes of those.
Yeah, I haven't done that in a while, but yeah.
And you've paneled at Comic-Con with that, haven't you?
have.
Did you do that
Comic-Con.
last year? What was your panel last year?
Yeah, I did it this year as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was, it's called Key Frames, where we talk to artists about their favorite panels in comics, and then their own panels, and then also other artists and other comic books that inspired them. But I haven't made that podcast in a while. I still love, though, talking to artists about comics. I was never a comic book reader as a kid, you know, so it was cool to get into it now, and now I find I really enjoy it.
On the creation and writing side of it.
Yeah.
What are the difference between WonderCon and Comic-Con? Do you have like a special place in your
I
heart
love
for-
WonderCon.
You love WonderCon?
Yeah,
Oh,
I love it.
interesting.
I
Why is
actually,
that?
I like it a little more than Comic-Con.
Do you really? Do tell.
The reason is because, there's two reasons actually. One is, and I think everybody can, any diehard comic fan who's been around for long enough knows that Comic-Con now is not Comic-Con what it used to be and what it started out as,
You can feel it walking around.
Yeah, now it's pop culture con in a way. But WonderCon has that same feel, but it's still more about the comics and the art. And I love it. It's like a smaller Comic-Con where it's not so crazy. You know? But I've also done Baltimore Comic-Con, which is actually my favorite Comic-Con of all of them.
I don't think of Baltimore as a Comic-Con city.
Well, it's, you know, several hours from New York City. So, you know,
right.
it's all Washington, D.C. is right there, you know, Philadelphia. So it's a whole hub. Plus, the other thing is in San Diego, you've got the Eisner Awards, which is...
Yeah, Will Eisner.
Yeah, but in...
Dropsy.
Yeah, in Maryland, or the Baltimore Comic-Con, you have the Ringo Awards. So it's kind of a same thing, but East Coast, West Coast.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
What about TPIMN? You just walked around the neighborhood.
The people in my
interviewing
neighborhood.
people.
Yeah. That was a fun podcast to make. I only made 8 of them, but it was cool to be able to talk to people I know, both here in San Diego and outside of it, just about what sort of drives them and motivates them to keep going, so to speak, you know?
Did you find out anything about a neighbor that you probably shouldn't have known or didn't want to know?
Yeah, actually. And let me clarify, when I say neighbor, I don't mean like we live next to each other.
Yeah,
I
San
say
Diego
sort of
neighbors.
my mental neighborhood, you know, just people I know. But one person, Jody, she's great. She's super cool. She used to do frog gigging.
Frog gigging?
Yes, and I think there are people in the Midwest, the upper Midwest, that may know what that is, but it's not a great thing.
Are these frogs spread out and they're squeezing the juice out?
Well, they're trying. Well, there's also like
eat it and
they
trip
flood
out
the
or something?
ground to get like animals
It's a
out of it.
terrible thing, isn't it? Yeah.
It's not good. But
it's
they
like
would do that
eating
as a
peyote
kid
or
because
something.
it was very like it's just you live in this rural area, sometimes on a farm, and you know that's what they did.
What
you
is
know?
it called again?
I think she called it frog gigging.
Frog gigging.
Yeah.
Frog gigging. You learned about it here on
Hey, you know
Conversations
what?
with Poets.
I might have to name that my next poetry book. Then.
Yeah, maybe. So what came first? Was it did the podcasting come first, and the interviewing and like kind of meeting people come first? No, probably the writing first, right?
I've been writing
poetry
since I
first.
was a kid. You know, like I have an image in my head that I've had since I was a child of me sitting in a room with a typewriter because I'm that old, because that's what I thought I would be writing on.
too.
You know, and just sitting there, just typing away in this room. I've got a window and a desk, and I'm just happy. And so I've always had that image in my head. I've been writing stories and poetry since I was a kid. You know, it's just what I know and what I feel the most in place.
Yeah, your writing often has a real musicality to it, a real rhythm to it as well.
The poetry does,
Has it
yeah.
always been that way?
No, it hasn't actually. And when I moved here is when that sort of changed.
Oh, why?
You know Ted Washington and Puna Press. When I
Our mom, Ted.
Ted's great. When I put my book out through Puna Press, one of the things he said was that he wants me to get out there and write. Or read to the general audience. So I started doing that, but then I saw Rudy Francisco and Chris Van Oy perform, and I realized that my poetry needed to level up. You know, and I liked that the way they perform and the way they have that sort of song-like or rhythm in it, in their poetry. So I was like, I want to do that. That's how I want to be. And I started changing my poetry to sort of write like that.
Both those writers, you know, can capture an audience.
Yeah.
Rudy all the way to the top, right?
Oh, yeah,
National Poetry
for
Slam,
sure,
put
yeah.
San Diego on the map, absolutely.
And then
Chris Fenoy, the beat poet of the
laureate,
Cosmos,
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Everybody knows Chris Fenoy.
Yeah.
perfect for inspiration for the kind of writing that
Yes.
would engage an audience, you know what I mean?
Yes, I had my book release party, and he was one of the readers that was there, and I remember it was at the Whistle Stop Bar,
Yeah,
you know, and he
amazing.
was in the back, and his name was called, and he started reciting his poem from the back of the bar, and made his way all the way around, still reciting, and then ended it and walked right out the door, and the audience was just stunned.
In a bar.
In a bar.
In a bar where
and
everybody's been knocking him back.
Pitch quiet too.
Yeah,
So.
and listening to him, right?
Yeah.
Knows how to do it. Did you bring some poems today?
I did.
Right.
Mine or
Can we hear
others?
some poetry?
Yeah.
Yours. Let's hear one of yours first.
Okay. You know, this one I'm going to use my phone if
Go
that's
for
okay.
it.
I try
Of
not
course.
to. But
Tech.
this one was recently published in Greenfield magazine.
Gotcha.
And I'm actually pretty proud of this one. So this one is called Lens.
Lens.
When my father died, the only thing he left me was out of his will. His wife, in her grief, gave me his camera. I pulled the black body out of the bag, the sudden weight of it heavy as the memory of his fists. And I'm struck with how meaningfully meaningless it all really is now. A Goliath already gone, stones taken with him. And I have no heart for this, not anymore. No energy to create new memories, not this way. I've reframed images, burned the negatives, hung new contentment on the walls. For sale, my father's camera.
Mm. Yeah. Get it out.
Get it out.
Feel it.
Yeah.
Get it down. Get it out.
You know, people ask me, like, what's so good about poetry sometimes, you know? And I'm like, that right there, you know, to just get out. And that didn't start the way that ended up, you know? It was much messier, but it had everything out.
Yeah.
And then I could look at it, and through the process of editing, I was able to process those emotions.
Do you keep that original raw getting it out?
So,
I hope you do.
I try to, but sometimes a lot of the times I don't. You know, when I do my fiction, yes, I have multiple drafts. When I do poetry, I tend to not keep the old drafts because I tend to write it on electronic, my iPad or my phone or whatever, instead of paper. So I don't tend to keep it. I just write over it.
Henry's writing now, my son. He's in his 20s now, right? And I'm just like, man, he's constantly deleting. I'm like, no, don't delete.
Well, let me ask you this. You know, I'm going to interview you for a second.
Let's go.
You know, when you see artists out there, they start painting, and then they'll paint over it, and then they'll cover it up and paint over that.
Right.
You know, and do you find that problematic? Do you want them to say?
No, because I get it, right? You're layering a painting, right? You're layering a painting. You're making it better, maybe.
So
right?
would writing
you're
be the same?
making it, and it is a process of layers, right?
Yeah.
Writing is different. Writing is coming from somewhere deep, and sometimes the very beginning of that writing is the deepest part.
The deepest, yeah.
And it, to me, seems beneficial, especially as the grays and the wrinkles come, to be able to go back to that place and know, if nothing else, you were brave enough to get it out. You know what I mean?
Well, I remember
and to remember for real what you were feeling in the moment, which was the reason why I wrote it down in the first place.
That can be helpful for sure.
Yeah.
I remember when I gave my poetry to Ted and Kara Goldfarb, who was the editor of my book. Yeah, she.
Where's Kara?
She's in New York City.
Yeah, I know. She left for New York and never came back.
But I remember I gave them a thick stack of just paper, you know, and some of it was actually, I used to work overnights at a gas station, and I used to write my poetry on, when I would open up the cigarette cartons, I would tear them apart, and I would use the long side, the blank side, and I would write my poetry on that. And I still have those.
Do you? Oh,
yeah,
there you
I
go.
do.
See?
So
that's why paper's a good thing.
that's exactly,
cell phones,
yeah.
man.
That's why I don't keep a lot of my old stuff these days, because I write it electronically, whereas I still have all of my old writing from when I was a teenager. You know?
Yeah, well, because it can't go anywhere.
But
except for breakdown, right?
But I will say it didn't help me. You know, like looking back, it doesn't remind me of things.
Go through it.
You know, go through it.
I get,
I think I might want to run away from it.
Yeah, you might, but you won't. I
Right.
guarantee you when you start digging into it.
Probably.
No, you also had another inspiration up in San Francisco, right?
Yes.
Ferlinghetti.
Lawrence Ferlinghetti.
Yeah, what was it about Lawrence Ferlinghetti that got you, fired up?
There's something about the way he describes the real world in almost a shocking way that I like that sort of writing, you know, and in a way I try to when I write my poetry, I say it and then I try to say it a different way. But I like the way he really gut punches you sometimes, you know, and then he says something, like he's got a line in one of his poems. It says, a poem is a mirror walking down a strange street.
Indeed.
You know, and it is, poem does reflect the real world, but to say it that way, just really, it hits me, you know.
Yeah, candor, right?
Yeah.
Straight up.
Yeah.
And wise. Wisdom
Very,
through
very,
candor.
yeah.
Wisdom through real experience,
Yes,
right?
very much.
Did you bring, The World is a Beautiful Place?
Yeah, I'm going to read
You
it
got
from his book, though.
All right, yeah, City Lights, man. I
yeah.
got this pin up at City Lights. Look at that, see what that says?
Oh, am I allowed to say that?
We'll hold off on
We'll
it.
hold off on it? All right, yeah. No, this particular one, it's kind of poignant. You know, I always love poetry that might have been written 60 years ago, but still matters today, and still you can correlate it with things happening today.
Yeah,
so
no doubt.
he has a poem. Now, in this book, he usually writes his poetry, or he names his poetry as the first line of the poem, which Ted Washington was like, don't do that. But this one, it's number 25 in Pictures of the Gone World. I think in other places it's called The World is a Beautiful Place. The world is a beautiful place to be born into, if you don't mind happiness, not always being so very much fun. If you don't mind a touch of hell now and then, just when everything is fine, because even in heaven, they don't sing all the time. The world is a beautiful place to be born into, if you don't mind some people dying all the time, or maybe only starving some of the time, which isn't half so bad if it isn't you. Oh, the world is a beautiful place to be born into, if you don't much mind a few dead minds in the higher places, or a bomb or two now and then in your upturned faces, or such other improprieties as our name-brand society is prey to with its men of distinction and its men of extinction and its priests and other patrolmen, and its various segregations and congressional investigations and other constipations that our fool flesh is heir to. Yes, the world is the best place of all for a lot of such things as making the fun scene, and making the love scene, and making the sad scene, and singing low songs and having inspirations and walking around, looking at everything and smelling flowers and goosing statues, and even thinking and kissing people and making babies and wearing pants and waving hats and dancing and going swimming in rivers on picnics in the middle of the summer and just generally living it up. Yes, but then right then in the middle of it comes the smiling mortician.
The Reaper loves you too.
Yeah, right. It always comes back to that end. It's just, there's this world, a little bad, but in the end, you know, and I love that stuff. I love the way that's...
Yeah, he was keeping it real back then,
very
right?
much was, yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. I like City Lights. I used to go up there all the time. I went to high school in Napa, up in Napa Valley. And we'd go to the city and go to City Lights and read and hang out. And
I've never been.
Go up to the quiz. You've never been once?
I've never been. But
Not
Chris
one time.
Van Noy actually helped Lawrence Ferlinghetti move a bookshelf. That's his, like, he always tells me that story.
Oh,
you know,
really?
It's like, I helped him move a bookshelf.
Wow. What was said? Nothing, probably. Right?
Nothing
it was
at all,
quiet.
probably,
Yeah. So what do you got coming up next? What do you got going on?
You know, right now I am very much focused on trying to get the manuscripts of writing that I've got ready to go. You know, I'm doing a lot of podcast work for clients. You know, I'm working with the Conrad Prebys Foundation on their podcast called Stop and Talk, and that takes up a lot of time, but it's an enjoyable amount of time.
What does Stop and Talk about?
They actually talk to philanthropists here in San Diego who are trying to get the word out about the arts and health and humanity, and just spreading the money around to where it's needed. Right. So it's cool to hear from these people. You know, we interviewed Rafael Payare, the symphony the conductor. We interviewed Erwin Jacobs, which, I mean, we all know Erwin Jacobs. Yeah, like on all kinds of people, you know. And
are you asking questions?
I'm not. I'm actually recording and engineering and co-producing. So it's finally a chance for me to sit and just listen to the people talk. But
is there anybody who you haven't spoke to, local or otherwise, who you would just, did you have like a bucket list of people you'd like to
for
talk
that
to?
podcast or my own?
Any.
Am I? You know, I do. As much as I love Rudy Francisco, I still haven't had a chance to have him on the podcast. Yeah, not yet. I'm actually starting to work on branching outside of San Diego. The thing about San Diego, though, is we've got such a vast writing scene.
We do
and
now,
it seems like I'm never going to run out of people to see if they want to be on the podcast. I've got 70 some odd podcasts by this point.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
You're in the hundreds of
I'm in the
hundreds with each
70s
of
for the
them,
writing one, but
for
you
the
know,
writing
like
one.
if you consider the teasers,
the
we can
written
put it up.
scene?
The
Is
written
that-
scene,
right,
yeah.
right.
So, but you know, I don't know. There are a lot of people out there, and I every month I'll sit down once, twice a month and go, okay, who's on my people to contact, you know? And I'm always like surprised that I'm just not running out of people to talk to.
Yeah,
So.
Rudy's a great interview. I was lucky enough to interview him
Yeah.
a couple years back
Yeah.
in the Central Library
Oh yeah.
up in the Shiley. So we were next to Petco Park in
Oh, that
downtown,
would've been great.
Logan behind us, and the whole city all around, you know, and it was a real neat experience. And he's articulate, you know, he on stage, right? He's his you know, his presence and the way he performs, but even just chatting with him, he's very articulate. And
Anthony Blackshear's the
great
same
interview.
way.
He was sitting in the room when
Was
I
he?
interviewed. He was sitting
Okay.
in the room, and I think
right.
Anthony's one of the only people who's ever beat Rudy at one of the poetry
Oh,
slams
really?
way back
Okay.
in the day. So
right.
we
That would be a good
we
one to
teased
watch.
that a little bit. We got to play with him a little bit during the interview.
Anthony's great.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to talk to him for the podcast, but
Yeah.
he's great.
I asked him a question about emulating other poets, right? And his answer was, I think, spot on. He said it's one thing to emulate a poet and to have the voice like a poet, to start that way, but it's a whole other thing to end up that way, to end up like somebody else, like some other poet.
Yeah.
He said it better than I just
No,
said
no,
it,
but that's
generally. Yeah, and do you feel like at this stage you've sort of found your voice in who you are? You have.
I didn't when I moved here and started reading. I felt like I was just reading, you know, and then I figured it out. Like I was like, oh, here's how I want to sound, you know. That took a lot of practice in an empty apartment with a very annoyed cat, you know. But yeah, like I really wanted to figure out how I wanted to sound as myself, because I noticed I would start to try to sound like Chris or Rudy or somebody, and it just didn't work out.
Yeah.
You know, so I figured if I can grab pieces of those and make my own, I'll be okay.
So you got manuscripts going, and you're looking for a home.
Eventually looking for a home, yeah.
And the podcast will carry on.
I've got my collection.
And then F it, right? Every
prose has its thorn. Yeah.
Tell us, what's that about?
That is a
Where
monthly
can people find you?
prose and poetry reading. It's on the fourth Monday of every month at San Diego Writers Inc.
Oh yeah, you guys were at Thorn.
We were at Thorn Street Brewing, yeah.
Yeah. How's it going at San Diego Writers Inc?
It's great.
We just had Judy in here right before their 20th anniversary. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
She was great.
It's
It was
great
fun
to
to
be
talk
at
to her.
that location. So
Yeah, and it's right around the corner from here in Liberty Station.
Yeah.
What day did you say? What day of the month?
The fourth Monday of every month. So
Fourth
even if
Monday
there's
of every
5
month.
Mondays, it's still the fourth Monday.
And how can people find you? Instagram?
Instagram, sign up for the San Diego Writers Inc. newsletter. They're always promoting there, but yeah, on Instagram you can find
That's
us.
a good idea anyway, because they kind of have their fingers on the pulse of what's
They
happening.
really do. They got a
And
lot
they
of cool
support other
classes.
organizations
They do.
by putting their events out, which is
do.
great. So all hail San Diego Writers
Yeah,
Inc. They're
I'm
great.
such a big fan.
It's
It
a
was
good
cool to
home.
be at the celebration recently when they got the
20 years.
and there was San Diego Writers Inc. Day.
Yeah.
I thought that was super
Proclamation,
cool.
let's go.
Yeah.
Todd Gloria show up for that?
He didn't, but Marnie von Wilpert did.
Oh, gotcha, okay.
Yeah, city councilwoman. So
Yeah.
that was cool for her to.
You know Robert O up
Yeah.
in North County, he just had a proclamation day.
I saw that.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And the mayor of Escondido showed up.
He did show up,
Lizzie
okay.
Wan came down from Orange County.
She's another great one.
Yeah, you know, there was a lot of crying and just like tears of joy.
Right,
you
right,
know,
right.
and
Yeah, it's a
it was such a
celebratory
neat
thing.
experience. Yeah, and Robert is someone like you who's just given back so much, made
great.
spaces for people. You know,
I had a chance to sit down
Poets
and talk
need
to
it.
him for a little while at a book event, and it was just.
Yeah.
It was like I was tapping into when you
He's a
talked
good
about
dude.
Noam Chomsky and talking. It was
Yeah.
like I feel like I was talking to someone who was up here.
He
you
was
know?
a good dude, yeah, and he has been on point, you know, on the job for so many years,
bet, I
and
bet.
still going strong.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Well, Adam Greenfield, thank you so much for doing
course.
Conversations
Thanks
with
for having me.
Poets. I'm
It was
looking
fun.
forward to everything that's coming. We're in the throes of getting the San Diego Poetry Annual together, so
I got to send out my
acceptance
acceptances.
letters. Yeah, me too. I'm right in the middle of that as well. I was talking to Carla today, and all the
Okay.
editors are on the job right now.
Very cool.
And pretty soon we'll be congratulating poets for their publication, right?
Yeah.
In the annual, and then the bilingual edition is just about finished.
Okay.
We're
And there's the
almost
kids
there.
one too.
The kids one, and then we've also got, we're
Veterans.
interviewing Chus Pato, one of the poets in the bilingual edition.
Yeah.
She won the Spanish National Poetry Prize
Whoa.
2024.
Very
She's
cool.
officially massive, right?
Wow.
And she's going to be interviewed for Conversations with Poets, the last one. We're doing that one on Zoom.
That is a great headliner.
Yeah. So again, thank you so much
Thank
for
you,
doing
Michael.
this, and
this
I
was
love
fun.
you, man. And everybody, please go to the Central Library, the City of San Diego website for Conversations with Poets. There you can find the YouTube page, and you can like and subscribe. That helps us. Leave some comments and say hello and connect with Adam. Go check out his readings and his podcasts. And thank you once again to Point TV and Point Loma Nazarene University. Right on.